Welcome to the Magdalene Voices, giving voice to those silent for centuries through sacred conversations with beautiful, illuminating souls. I am your host, Maria Estella. Today I am joined by Keri Nola for a sacred conversation about the shadow aspects of our divine feminine and divine masculine essences. Keri Nola is a serial soulful entrepreneur expressing her work as a best-selling author, intuitive psychotherapist, energetic visionary, podcaster, oracle card creator, and founder of the Sacred Soul Circle for Healing Entrepreneurs. She is also the co-founder of the sacred shopping site and podcast galacticvibrations.com. While building and maintaining an abundant clinical practice for over a decade, Keri's work has since evolved to support lightworkers in awakening their gifts through virtual products, programs, and retreats. Keri is on a mission to ignite a global heart-centered conversation that allows healers to activate their healer archetype and bring their precious light to the planet at this special time of humanity's evolution. Feeling most at home by the water, she shares her time between Florida and Southern California. So, today I want to welcome Keri Nola. And Keri, welcome to the Magdalene Voices. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's a gift to be with you. I'm excited to see what unravels.
Me too. I'm actually very excited. I was, as I was preparing for this conversation, I was actually thinking about how I would go about this, and I thought I would start by, because today we're going to be talking about the divine feminine and the divine masculine, but most importantly, we're going to be talking about their shadow aspects, which is something that you are, I would say, an expert in. And I would start by actually saying, because so many people are saying namaste, which means the light in me sees the light in you. But what I would actually begin with is the bitch in me greets the bitch in you.
So what do we call that? Bitches stay?
We probably could. Yes.
I love that.
Yes.
I receive that, and I send it back as well. How beautiful if not only our light could be blessed and honored, but our inner bitch could be seen and heard and valued too.
Yeah. And I know that's something you're an expert in, and the reason why this was came up for me was because it was at a moment where I had been a bitch, like a true bitch, and I don't want to be a bitch. Very few of us wants to be a bitch, but something that I have taught or learned from you and has been to truly acknowledge that the bitch in me lives and to give her space. And as I was going through this moment, I was immediately I was realizing that I didn't want to be a bitch, and then I thought, oh, Keri, and then I thought, okay, so tell me about the bitch, and I'm like, okay, she's a lioness. She's someone who will fight tooth and nail for her cubs and for what she believes in. And she's someone who will set up boundaries for me to help me make sure that my boundaries are not surpassed or stepped over. And I know that you have, or at least that's what I find, you have a unique way of working with the shadows and of acknowledging them and actually using them in our, what I would call our awakening journeys. Would you mind talking just a little bit about, what you do, how you do it, what it is that, why is it shadows, and what's so important in that for you?
Oh, sure. Well, thank you first for seeing my for reflecting me back to what you see in me and my ability to do that, because I feel like my own awakening has really brought me to this space where there was a time in my own journey where I was trying to get rid of parts of myself. I was like, okay, well, this one doesn't fit, and this is bad, and this is good. And there was all this categorization and compartmentalizing within myself. And I found that it was just creating more and more distance and separation from within me. And it was creating all these symptoms of disconnect and separation in my relationships with others. And I started playing with the possibility that all parts of me may be able to be welcomed. You know, maybe I don't want to lead with these parts all the time, or maybe I want to understand them better. But what if they have gifts and value and purpose? I really love the way you expressed, you know, the qualities that you see in the bitch, the lioness, the boundary setter, the assertiveness, the protection that shadow offers. And so for me, that it's really about wholeness. It's about how do we take the parts of us that have been locked up or set aside because they haven't been welcome in our families, in societies, in relationships, and how do we find out their value, their purpose, their job, what they're really supporting us with and for? Because what I found is all of these identities and aspects of self are working on our behalf. For whatever reason, at whatever time, these expressions of self have been necessary. And when we write them off, the gifts that they have, the light aspects of their expression, for example, taking the bitch, if we get rid of her altogether and we don't have the ability to set boundaries, well, that's going to create for some, you know, more shadow awakening and other work to do later. So yeah, how does that feel? That's kind of my sense about it right now, and part of my own progress and process. And so as I woke up to that within myself, I began supporting my clients in holding space for the dark parts of themselves. And the most magical piece is that the deeper I got within my own shadows and the parts of me that I wanted to push away and resist and throw out and disown, the more I began to allow them to be welcome within me, the more I began to love and cherish them within other people as well. Not only in my professional life, but in my personal life, my relationships got richer and deeper and more real and raw. And it wasn't because, you know, we were just all lovey-dovey all the time. It was because there was a transparency and an honoring of all aspects instead of just the parts of self that we prefer.
Yeah. So it gets, like you say, it gets real, and it gets raw and like juicy and intensive. It's funny because when I very often, or like I would say, even with myself before I began my whole, you know, journey of awakening and transformation and spiritual, whatever we want to call this, thought it was all about, you know, love and light and, you know, happiness and joy and ultimately it is. But something I don't think that spiritual workers or light workers or whatever we want to call them, people who are on their, you know, awakening paths, something we don't get credit for is the amount of shit and muck and dirt that we actually clear from within ourselves. Because those who believe that the spiritual path is an easy one, for me, I think they've kind of, they haven't gone deep enough if that's what they see, because it's about, you know, cleaning up and cleaning out all of those what you call, I call them veils, like to the lifting of the veils and going within ourselves. In terms of the way you see it, so for me, it's important that we balance out the divine, both the divine feminine and the divine masculine sides of ourselves. And those are what we could probably call the light aspects. And then you have the shadow aspects of those. How do you find that those shadow aspects are important or useful to someone who is waking up, as we could call it?
Yeah, I think it helps us to own the fullness of who we are and our experiences. So I really love what you were just talking about. If we're only looking at the love and light, or the rainbows and unicorns, as I call it, we're only looking at half of the aspects. And there are riches and treasures that are hiding in those dark aspects. So when we think of the divine masculine and the divine feminine, I feel like there's been so much repression and suppression of the gifts of both aspects. And I feel like as the feminine rises, we could get into that shadow aspect of pushing the masculine down, or judging the masculine, and shaming the masculine. And so I think for the feminine to rise, we also have to allow the masculine to rise. Yeah. The masculine for me is the light aspect of the masculine is the presence, the ability to hold space and be present, the container. Whereas the divine feminine, of course, is the radiance, the showing up in the truth of wherever we are, and having that masculine container to hold and support that flow. Yeah. Yeah, does that answer your question? I feel like I could just talk for days about this in a lot of directions. So
absolutely, and we probably could. The question that comes up for me is like, if you're someone who's, because as I said, I mean, for me, working with your shadows is not for those faint at heart. It is deep, dark work. And for me personally, I see it as, or I feel as though it's you know, it is the light aspects, it is the love aspect that actually bring us onto our spiritual paths. And once we acknowledge that we are spiritual beings and begin our journeys, then we begin to uncover the dirt, or all of the shadows that comes up. And that's when the actual work begins, because it's very easy to say you want to stand for love, like I do. It's very easy to say I choose love, and because, you know, who would not want to choose love? But can you actually choose love when you're when you're faced with a voice within your head that's just telling you how bad you are and how you're no good and how you won't ever get anywhere, or any, like, whatever it is that voice is telling you, and then be able to hold a space for that, to look at that, and to love that as well. I know that the question I had and have is, if someone has never worked with shadows before, since, you know, the Magdalene Voices is completely new, I don't know who was being brought to it, but I just want to make sure that those perhaps who haven't gone into it but kind of feel that they're on that, where would you recommend? I know that you have some amazing shadow cards. I'm not sure if that's where you're going to go, but I want to make sure that we see those as well, because I know that you brought them. But where would you have someone begin? Basically, if they want to have, you know, if they're feeling called to do some shadow work.
Sure. So I think, you know, there's external resources and then there's the internal resource. So I would say begin within. When you said I stand for love and that it's easy to go there, I think the expanded version of that is I stand for truth. And I stand for whatever truth is rising up in me in any moment. So to me, shadow work begins with a rigorous practice of telling myself the truth, whatever that is. I hate myself right now. I hate my lover right now. I hate my kid right now. I am, you know, terrified of, you know, not being enough. I want to kill that person. I'm so pissed that they did that. You know, whatever it is that's rising up in me, meet it and say, I see you. I hear you. I'm ashamed that I'm having this thought. Okay, that's the next truth that rises up. So it's like, whatever truth rises, can we meet it? And meeting it for me just says, I see you. I hear you. I don't necessarily like you. I'm mad that you're here. I'm glad that you're here. I'm sad that you're here. Whatever it is. So just, can we meet ourselves there? And that, to me, you know, no matter, there could be books you read, there could be people that you choose to study with or be reflected back to yourself by, but at the end of the day, it's me, myself, and my truth, and whether or not I'm willing to acknowledge and embrace that.
That is so powerful. I had goosebumps all over.
Yes.
It's like there's like a stirring of it. It's like I see like a pot like that's being stirred. It's like, I stand for truth. It's like reclaiming the truth. Yes. and not having to be anything else but what you are in that very, very moment. That's so powerful. Thank you for thank you for reflecting that.
You're welcome. And that to me is love.
Yeah.
Is a willingness to tell ourselves the truth. And we can't, I think a lot of times in relationships, we feel lied to or betrayed, or like a break in loyalty of some sort. But for me, that's because there's an absence of truth within ourselves. Because if we're in touch with our own truth, it also opens, I think, our intuitive centers. Our third eye begins to open. The third eye is about seeing beyond illusion. So I can see the illusion in you when I'm willing to see it in me. So you can't pull the wool over my eyes if I'm not already doing it. I can sense that you are doing something that's out of alignment with our commitment, our agreement, our boundaries, because I'm telling myself the truth. But if I'm hiding the truth from me, I certainly can't tell when you're hiding the truth from you or from us or whatever might be unfolding. So I think that's also the other piece of this shadow work is deeply owning who we are, what we're doing, what we're not doing, how we're feeling. It's like a sense of sovereignty and freedom and power that goes so far beyond the superficialness that humanity has grown into to feel safe and protected and not, feel hurt, which is all normal. And our ego does a really great job of that. And if we can embrace the ego and deepen into these other aspects of ourselves, I think our experience becomes so much more rich and ripe for expansion, which is what I've noticed.
Yeah. Wow. I'm just loving this. There's like, ooh, I'm not even sure where to go next, but I'm just gonna go because you mentioned relationships, and I would say that relationship is a great place to go for reflections of your shadows, because it's a great place if you feel like you're done, because like there are those times where you're like, oh, I'm so done, I'm so over it, and I'm just so at peace and so clear, and then wham, hang
out with your mother for a minute, or your father, or your sibling, or your partner, and your kids, and woo, you'll find out what work is left to be done real fast.
Yes, you'll be shown when you're willing to do that. And I was just thinking, I was just going to mention that to the viewers and the listeners that within that, if that's where you're at, if you're thinking that, okay, I'm at the place where I feel okay and I feel perfect, then I would suggest that you go through your relationships and ask yourself, like, who annoys me and who pisses me off, and who, and once you do that, realize that it's all a reflection of what's going on your inside. Not that you're to blame or to shame for it at all. It's not your fault. There's no guilt or any of that involved. But like you said, own the truth of what it is. I'm pissed at this person, and I hate her for stepping on my toes and for smoking, if that's it, or for whatever it is. And then take it back to your what's really going on. If you're pissed at someone for smoking, is she in your space, or you're in your space? Are you not setting the boundaries within that relationship or wherever you are? I'm just going to put that on there. And then what was the second thing that came? I would also say that if someone is thinking that they're done or perfect, or I would also suggest that perhaps that there's a difference between, I always say there's a difference between ignoring and denying. So if you ignore something, it's just going to blow up in your face. But if you know that something is there, you acknowledge it, but you denied it any effect over you, you can actually live with it or have it be without having to interact with it. Did you have any comments? No.
Well, yeah, along those lines, I think sometimes there's shadows that we can bring to light, but we're not ready to work with them yet. And I think that's another beautiful part of the truth is, I'm really feeling triggered, or there's a charge, something activates in me in this relationship or these kinds of situations. And I want to acknowledge that there's something unresolved there for me. And I want to acknowledge that I'm not ready to do anything about it yet.
Yeah.
perfect. But there's that truth that you're telling yourself. Otherwise it goes back into the vault of, shadows and darkness and secrets, and it has to pop up in different ways, and it begins to catch us off guard. So if we can just acknowledge what we're ready and willing to be with and address or not, we're in our power, and we can revisit that. But it doesn't have to knock quite as loudly to get our attention, which I think is really the process. While it's messy and I think challenging in a lot of ways, right? I think it can be easier and more graceful if we're less resistant. So to me, it can be hard, but it's a hard that I kind of crave now. It's like, okay, if I'm not feeling that, my life, it doesn't feel full. It loses a richness that I really crave now. Yes. Where at one time it was so terrifying that I couldn't stand, getting too close to it. And there's still things that pop up that, that have that feeling for me, but I find it's less intense and fewer and farther between now.
Yes. And do you also feel, I don't know if it's if I'm the nerd or what, but sometimes when that pops up, when you get that, ooh, then you become like, ooh, interesting. What's going on?
Curious, right?
Yeah, you become cute, and it seems so wacky, but you become so like, ooh, I'm feeling this what, and I'm like, my throat is closing, and I can't. I'm scared, and I'm sweating, and we're like, what's going on? Why am I this? I mean, I have this in different situations, and I'm just saying this because it's not necessarily just in one area of your life. For me, I know that you've done CrossFit in the past as well, and I'm an avid CrossFitter, and I love CrossFit, but for me, CrossFit is also a space of deep spiritual development, because it has so much for me in my not enoughness, and in my I can't do this, and I get so I'm just mentioning that to say that it's not necessarily in your relationships with people, but it's also in your relationship with yourself. I was going to say that what you said before about I guess that once you begin telling yourself the truth, it is also easier to recognize it, like you said, in others. And it becomes easier and easier to stay in your truth and say, no, thank you, rather than, all of the cuss words and no, if you and whatever.
Yes.
That's what I've noticed. For, again, one area was with my mother. I thought I was like spiritually done, and everything was just blah. And then I had to live with my mother, and it was like, oh, okay, I guess I'm not done, and I was like, there's a part of me that's saying, thank you, universe, for giving me this opportunity to look at this. And then there was another one that was like, I hope I don't kill her. Help me.
Yes. Asking for help, surrendering, all of that.
And I know that we're smiling and it may sound nice, but in those situations where I'm sitting holding onto my bed, it's like, those are not pretty ones. They're not pretty. I just want to make that very clear. They're not pretty. I just want to make sure that people don't understand that this is not, for me at least, maybe others can do it pretty. I can't do it pretty. And the way that I began doing this was actually driving in traffic. I was noticing how, everyone was an idiot at traffic. And I was like, I wonder what's going on. And then that's where I think I began this, quote unquote, shadow work or yes, to look at it from that perspective. Something that is calling me is your shadow cards. And I don't really have a beautiful bridge into those, but I wanna bring them up because they're so beautiful. And I know that you share them on Instagram, and I'll be sure to include the links for both Instagram and for the cards if people are wanting to see them and perhaps even buy them because you sell them. How did the shadow cards come about? And thank you for allowing those.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, thank you for following the call to see the beauty in them. I think that's one of those things is I've had some people look at them and they're like, oh, these are all, wow. Okay. I'm like, yep, that's the dark stuff. It's the real stuff. It's the stuff we don't want to look at necessarily. So I always say it's not your mama's oracle deck. It's the real deal that goes into deep cellular cleansing and ancestral processing and past life healing. And let me just give you the peak. So these are 34 energies that came through to me really as a part of my own process of shadow awakening. So basically I was finding that I would be feeling activated or a charge around something that I couldn't really understand. It was like, why is this pattern? What is going on? Like, what am I not seeing? Show me, help me. And I would go to different, oracle resources and decks, and I kept being shown the light version, of myself. And I'm like, yeah, I get that. It was like, everything's working out beautifully, or this is happening right on time. And I'm like, well, no shit, of course. Like, I get that, but I need to know what I can't see about myself that is here. And so I kept looking and looking, getting frustrated and blaming other people and decks. I'm like, why are these out there? I'm like, oh, okay. One day I heard the divine whisper, well, because you're going to bring them here. And not that the shadow isn't present in any deck. I mean, I know tarot, for example, there's lots of ways to look at shadow, but the resources I was being drawn to weren't showing me what I wanted to see. And it was perfect because spirit needed me to go down that path so that they could remind me, hey, you're the bringer of this energy. So I sat down in meditation and just really surrendered, and instantly within 10 minutes I had 33 of the 34 energies given to me, just words that were handed to me. And it took about 9 months, which is interesting with the human birthing process and this. I went back and I thought, oh, that was interesting. Between getting those words and then understanding the oracle system that they would end up birthing themselves into. And there's 34 cards in the deck. So after I designed and brought through the 33, they said, and lastly, we're going to add the ancestor code energy. So that was the last card that was brought to the deck, and that really honors our ancestral wounding around what has been tucked in the shadows for generation upon generation that may be clearing with us. Because a lot of times I think we have agreements to move energies on behalf of our lineage. And those of us that are awakening now really, I think, have some really solid and important contracts to be willing to do this work on behalf of our ancestors. And that not only clears for past generations and present, but also those that come after us as well.
Yes. And can you maybe show us just a few cards? Because
absolutely.
And I want to say, and I want to highlight this because I love what you said about sometimes it feels like you're being shown the light aspect, like everything is perfect and everything is just that it should be. And like you said, shit, we know that. I know that everything's okay, but what's really going on? Sometimes you get to a place where you can't really see it. And that's why I love the cards, is that you can actually go deeper with the cards and say, okay, or be drawn to, oh, okay. And it becomes your I would say your truth, but it's because there's always with the oracle cards, there's that, that does it resonate with me or not?
Right.
And even there are times where things like, oh, that's so not me, and then you realize, oh, perhaps it is.
Exactly. And the deck comes with a booklet, which I love. And Spirit was very specific. Each card is described in the booklet, and there's also a healing mantra that supports. And the images are all energetically encoded to clear at the cellular level. So there's like lots of avenues into the healing process with these energies. And the booklet has questions that help you to lean into the resonation. So it's not about me telling you what your shadow is, but it's more about, hey, this energy is showing up here today, and here are a couple questions to deepen into whether or not this really feels like it fits, or if you're ready to work on it. So I'm happy to show some cards, but Spirit said to pull one for our collective energy. So let's see which shadow. So the shadow of blame is actually showing up in our collective energy. So those of us called to the Magdalene voices and this community may be finding ourselves working through the shadow of blame, which can come up for any of us at any given time. And the shadow of blame is really an abandonment of our owning what is our responsibility. So we want to put things off on other people. You know, how could you do this to me? This is your fault. You've done this. And yes, there are things that other people are doing, absolutely. And they're responsible for the action or expression of that. But we've called it in. And I think that's the piece that, you know, for those of us that are really in the master's class of waking up, it really is about letting other people own their part, absolutely, but really stepping into a curiosity about why or how we have attracted something. Because, you know, not all of us are attracting the same thing. Not all of us are attracting the same partner or the same financial situation or the same, you know, just circumstances in our life. And so to me, I'm waking up to the fact that there's not a randomness. There's something that we are believing about ourselves that is, you know, hidden in our unconsciousness. There's something that we're doing or a way that we're expressing that is attracting something to us. Mm-hmm. And we've got to ask ourselves, and not just in the easy times, but, you know, I also want to know why or how I've attracted abuse, why or how I've attracted, you know, illness or dis-ease, or these are the places where shadow work, I think, is the most difficult, because we don't want to get into the culture of blaming people who appear victimized. We want to honor that feeling in human consciousness. And we also want to acknowledge that we are so powerful that we often call forward really painful and challenging situations in order to wake up to a deeper love and connection to ourselves. And I think that's really missed. We're very shaming of perpetration energy and the shadow of perpetration and the misuse of power. And we're polarizing that with poor victims and shame perpetrators. And the truth is, we have victim energy and we have perpetrator energy within all of us, and we can access and activate that at any moment. So when I can honor and own the perpetrator in me, I can honor and love the perpetrator in you. That doesn't mean I don't set boundaries or I don't invite you to own your responsibility for your peace. So this isn't like either or, this or that. And, you know, at first it was really hard for me to share this part of shadow work because I think it's an unpopular conversation. But today I feel it really an important shift in the global conversation. And I think it's giving us access to our power at a whole new level. So here's this, and let me just share the mantra. How are we on time? Are we getting there? I know been.
Yes, we if you don't mind another 5 or 10 minutes.
I'm good.
Okay, good, because
let's do it.
30 minutes just ran. But I have a few questions I would like for us to go maybe.
Okay, Let's do it. So let me share this healing mantra for the blame card for those of you that are feeling.
Because I think that exactly what you said, they're healing. So all of that work, like you said, it's very unpopular, or it has been unpopular, and it has been, but it has a healing purpose, and that's why. And I love what you said about the boxes or the polarities, and how, you know, you polarize things so that, you know, it's your fault and I can blame you, but, you know, what about my responsibility? Sorry. So it's about the healing. Thank you. Go ahead and give it to me.
And I think, to me, at my core, I really am, you know, an awakening healer. And so everything that I put out into the world isn't just about, you know, here's this thing, but it's how can this wake something up in you when you're ready to see it, so that your healing continues in the highest and best purpose for you. And I think that's the beauty of these cards. And I think of myself as a midwife for these energies. And when they are out there doing their thing, I think of like my child on a stage, like just shining, and I'm just celebrating how they're just dancing. And
so alive. I'm so impressed with they're so vivid on screen. I've seen them multiple times, of course, but I'm so impressed with they're so alive. At first, I was like, I'm not sure I like those, but now they're so vivid to me. So yeah, sorry. Go ahead and share the healing.
Yes. Oh, and they all correlate with the chakras too. So the energy of blame clears in the third eye and the crown, because that's about telling ourselves the truth and remembering our divine connection. So the healing mantra for this card, if you want to work with it, is I am worthy of taking full accountability for what is mine and releasing what is not. I am worthy of taking full responsibility for what is mine and releasing what is not.
Whew.
Worthy, isn't that interesting? Not only is it my job, but I'm worthy of doing it. So that to me signifies that, you know, there's a purpose for it, and we deserve to be in full connection and ownership with our behaviors and what we're calling forth. Interesting. Another card. I'm happy to show some more images, but there are a couple of light expressions in the deck, and this one was kind of falling out. So interesting. The love energy can show up to let us know that we're asking to be, we're being asked to bring love to a particular shadow. And so it explains in the book how to use the light cards and the collective. That's a neutral card in the deck. And this helps us to bring light to a shadow that is swirling around in the collective energy. Now, the collective, I've realized, is, as I've deepened into this system myself, is the collective can be our collective consciousness, like society or humanity, but it can also be our family collective. It can be the collective of a culture or of a community, or, like our office or something as well. So you can do relationship readings, you can do family readings. There's a lot of different ways to use the cards. Let's see a couple other images. Oh, another neutral card. They really want me to talk about the system. So the physical body card is another neutral card, because the shadows, when we're not addressing them, can manifest in our physical body. So earlier you mentioned like tightness in the throat, that could happen, but we could also develop more chronic physical situations to try to really call our attention. Maybe chronic respiratory infections, or situations with our bowel or our reproductive system, or diseases and things like that. So
that's very common, that I think that a lot of people are really not addressing, is back problems. People don't understand that the spine is our structure, it's our basis, and for each part of the back there is a correlating thing to look at, or issue to look at for you. For me personally, I had a deeply healing. I won't share it today, but I had a slipped disc in my lower back, and the moment something changed, that moment it clicked, and I didn't realize what I was doing in the moment. I just noticed that my back clicked into place, and I was on heavy painkillers and yada yada. And the next morning, I was off painkillers, and I was off 2/3 of the painkillers, and within a week I was pain-free, totally pain-free. And that was because I healed an issue or a fear that I had, and the moment that fear was healed, I wasn't even doing it consciously. It simply just happened. Yes. When you brought up the blame card, something that came up for me was, because you also spoke about the ancestor codes, it's also about the blame that's going on for centuries. One of the things that's very, or has been very vivid for me, and has been something that I've had to work through, is the past, the witches burning, the persecution of those who were not doing the right religion, the denial or the ignoring of everything that has to do with our Mother Earth, and even with I call her Mama Divine, because at one point, God was meant to be, or was thought to be, a woman. It's only been in the past, I guess, 2,000 or 2,600 years that God has been considered a male. So I think that. Because I truly believe that those who will be called to the Magdalene Voices will also be people who have, through centuries, have experienced persecution in one form or another. And so the blame card that came up for me is it seems very appropriate, because there's also a release and letting go of that blaming, because it would be easy to blame those who persecuted us for centuries, rather than looking at it ourselves, and also realizing that in this lifetime we are very, very fortunate to be. I know there's still places on our earth where that is not the case, but we are mostly very fortunate to be born into places where we have all of the quote unquote opportunities. We have the freedom of speech. We have the freedom of, to live where we want to. There's democracy, women's rights, and everything. And I know that in some parts of the world that seems to be going in the other direction, but I don't think that it is. I think it's truly just a final surrender, I suppose it is. But so the blame card for me, it seems very interesting, and also something. And this is going to be the final question, I promise, because in the system that has come up for me, and something that I'll be sharing as well is these the divine masculine and the divine feminine and their shadow aspects. And I was wondering, because what came to me was that it seemed that all of a sudden it came as a download, and it was very clear that we cannot deny our shadow aspects. Sometimes our divine essences are either suppressed either by ourselves or by our circumstances. And then we descend into the shadows. But what I see, that what you're bringing really into the world is an opportunity to use those to awaken even further. And I don't think that we are able to truly be the masters that we are, unless we actually are able to hold space for those energies as well. How do you see that?
Oh, I absolutely agree. And there's been a phrase that's been kind of in the energy throughout, and I feel like now it wants to be shared, which is anything that is suppressed by one must be expressed by another. So if we are repressing our masculine, or we're shaming the masculine, then the feminine has to be expressed elsewhere. And it usually is expressed tenfold because of the suppression. It's like you push a beach ball underwater, right? It's going to come flying up and out. And I feel like that's what we're seeing right now, is really this explosion of all that has been suppressed within the masculine and feminine energies of our culture. And so that was also about blame. It's like we keep blaming the patriarchy. We keep blaming, ourselves, or and that can be another way, internalizing the shadows of blaming the self. So it's not going to be until we say, patriarchy, I see how this imbalance occurred, and I see how I contributed to it. I see how I play into it. And this is what I wish for us now. And I'm willing to do my part in allowing that rising and that new conversation to emerge. So it's not like an us or them, this is right, this is wrong. It's really, how are we all contributing? And we have to believe we're worthy of contributing, and that our changes and our inner work matters and makes a difference and sends out that ripple and affects the whole planet. And I think that's why our inner work is the only way to receive outer change. Because we're all a part of this ecosystem and consciousness, and there's such an interplay between that.
And I love how we haven't even spoken about gender, because again, and I sense this in you, and I'm pretty sure, and please yell up if it's not the truth, but I'm pretty sure that for you as well, it's not about gender. It's not about men versus women. It's not about young versus old, or it's not even about color. I don't like the term racist, because I think that we're all one human race. We do have different colors, but we're all basically one human being, or one together, no matter what what gender we identify with, or sexuality we identify with, or whatever it is. Then Keri, I want to deeply thank you for having shown up in this conversation. And unless there's anything you want to add, or I know that sometimes spirit is tipping you. So if there's anything, then do you have any last words?
I think thank you is what's in my heart right now. Thank you for following your call to bring this forward, to create this space, and to have these conversations. And thank you for inviting me to join you, to be a part of it. I think this is, I'm feeling really expansive and full after our conversation, and I'm excited to hear what our communities and the listeners have to say about these things. So
Yes. There will be, options for commenting on our, both on YouTube and if you're listening to this on the podcast, then, there will be a link for the website to go to and stuff. So, but yeah, so let me close by saying thank you so much for showing up the way you've done, and thank you for shining both, a light and the darkness and on this world, and the healing work that you do. I know that it touches a lot of people, and I know it certainly has touched me. So.
You're very welcome.
What did we say? Bitch
just stay. Yes, bitches stay and namaste.
Yeah, bitches stay and namaste. That's how we'll end this. That is what we have for you in today's episode of the Magdalene Voices. I hope it served you well. If you are listening to this via podcast, know that you can go to my website, mariaestela.com. That's mariaestela.com for all of the deeds and the details. Finally, I hope you will take a moment to either leave us a comment or review and share it with your friends on social media. God bless.